I don't like podiums. Who here uses RegRipper? Anybody? Okay, so a couple of you know what it is. Okay, but before we get started, something else that just popped up today. What's the correct pronunciation? Is it GIF or GIF? So what's the correct pronunciation? RegRipper. You sure? It's not RegRipper? And yes. If you're a golfer, it's RegRipper. Yeah, because if you search for RegRipper and you go deep enough into the search results, you will find items from regripping golf. What do they call them? What's the word? Clubs? Bats? Sticks? What do they call them? I don't know. I don't play golf. So, okay. So we're going to go with RegRipper. So a couple of us folks use it. Raise your hands again. Who uses it? Who's used it? So, okay, how would you describe it? No. Thank you for that. Okay, but what would you describe? How do you use it? Preliminary analysis, and it does what for you? Okay, so it rips out information that he needs from the registry. So the name is kind of right there. Registry, Ripper, RegRipper. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else use it differently? Okay. So just to be absolutely clear, RegRipper is a parsing tool. I've been called pedantic several times throughout my career, and one of the things I'm pedantic about is tools do not do analysis, so this is not an analysis tool. This presents information to you that you can then analyze. And it gets a lot of necessary information for you from the registry, and we can go through some of the different things that it does. So the original design, this is part of the, this is sort of the history lesson kind of part of the presentation, since this is the maker's track. The original design started around 2007, where I started writing individual scripts to extract information from the registry. But as Jamie said, I was writing it in Perl. And I was doing this because, anybody know why? Again, this is a history lesson. Everybody's sitting over here. Almost nobody's sitting over there. What's that? The entrance over there. Anybody know why? Pattern recognition. Pattern recognition, close, okay. Go back a little further in history to around 2006, 2005, 6, 7-ish. Perl was the only language that had a module that a guy named McFarland had created that would parse offline registry files. It was the only language at the time that had this capability. I had started down the road and was getting close to completing my own module when his module came out, and I was like, there we go. It's all done for me. I'll just move on to the next step. And he's done some updates. I did some updates to his module over time, and he did some other fixes as well. But that's primarily why I started with Perl, is because the only capability I could find for parsing offline registry files was embedded in the language. And I was already programming in the language to begin with, so that was a great start. So I was writing scripts around 2007-ish, and I started getting this large folder of scripts. And it became completely unmanageable. You know, so I tried following the whole Linux methodology of creating program names, like those that you use the most often, you use the fewest letters in, right? And I quickly lost track of the scripts, like what I was doing. And then the interesting thing about Perl is nobody else I worked with used Perl. In fact, at the time we were doing incident response, nobody else I worked with really programmed beyond basic bash or batch scripts. So it was very difficult to like, hey, it might help you to pull this information out of the registry. So here's a script. It's like, well, what do I do with this? I don't have an interpreter. And then you walk them through the process of, at the time, going to active state and downloading it, and it just became unscalable, too untenable. So the idea was I had a lot of experience digging through the plugins that came with Nessus. Anybody remember Nessus? Okay, another history lesson. Anybody remember Satan? Anybody? Which, by the way, was also written in Perl? Anybody? Yes, I was in graduate school when Satan came out, and I was actually in meetings with network administrators who were pointing fingers at each other going, don't run Satan on my network. Anyway, that was written in Perl as well. So I wanted something modular, but also something that made it easy to manage and share these scripts that I was writing. And I started noticing as I looked through the scripts, I was actually writing my next script by copying and pasting the core code from a previous script. And then from that point, it was like, do I want to iterate through the keys? Do I iterate through the values? What do I want to do? But all the basic code was the same. So why not do something like Nessus and just have a core engine that contains that code. And then the plugins were like super easy to write. Well, super easy if you understand Perl, like data structures and hashes of hashes and hashes of lists and things like that. But once you get over that, you pull out the common code so you don't have to constantly rewrite it. And then using Perl to exe, which I will say, starting PCI investigations in 2007, the bad guys were using Perl to exe as well. So why not? Everybody was using it. So why not use it? So I compiled, made it into a Windows exe, made the core engine into Windows exe, and started sharing it with the other analysts that wanted to do the same thing. And all I had to do is like, hey man, I wrote a new plugin. I wrote this, or hey, here's a way that you can run this list of plugins every single time by typing in a single command. It's super easy. You know, some people were using like batch files and just like copying and pasting the RegRipper commands over and over again. It's like, well, here's another way we can do it. You know, but just make it real easy for other people to execute. Just make it real simple for them to do their job, because if it's too manually intensive when you're doing incident response, especially, what tends to happen? Does anybody do incident response? Is anybody awake in this room? What happens when it's a manually intensive process when you're doing any kind of incident response? Yes. Well, ultimately you automate it, but if you don't, you end up making mistakes. The manual stuff is error prone, so you go ahead and automate it because you just want the same thing to happen every time. Kind of like McDonald's. You want to go to McDonald's today and get what are they, Big Macs is what they call them? And then 6 months later, you want to go to a McDonald's in California and have the same taste, right? So you want that consistency. Again, Perl was the only language with the offline registry files, compile into a Windows exe so it was portable and make it available to others. Putting it up on something like, at the time, Google Drive made it easy for others to access. But if it was easy for the guys, the guys on the team, the guys and girls on the team to access, it was also easy for other people to access it, and that was cool too. It was like, hey, let's have a party. And the neat thing is, what I wanted it to do was be community driven. So I eventually moved it to GitHub. And the idea would be is, who raised their hand? You would use it, and you would say, hey, look, I ran the tool, and it found these cool things, but I went back and looked at the registry itself, and there's some other things around it that the tool doesn't pull out. And it's because they changed builds in Windows 10, or this customer has this particular application installed. Like, for a great example of that is, I didn't work at the investigation, but Don Weber, when we were working together, did an investigation where the customer had the LANDesk software monitoring application installed on the endpoint. And what that tracked in the registry was the first execution time of an application, the last execution time, and the username that ran it. And it's when you're doing incident response, I mean, that's gold, isn't it? You get the normal admin stuff, but if you know the compromised account, you've got right there in the registry with all these timestamps associated with it. I'd never seen it, but Don saw it. So what Don did was he wrote his own plugin. And because it's just a text file, it's really easy to attach it to an email and send it and say, hey, I use this on this engagement, it works. And the really cool thing about this is if you automate this, then I don't have to remember to run the plugin. So I can work an investigation and then 6 months later work a different investigation, and I don't have to remember to run the plugins because the entire process is automated. So that was a lot of the design decisions behind this product. And then over the years, as we started to dig into these transaction logs, anybody know what the transaction logs in the registry are? Anybody know? Anybody want to admit? Yeah, I guess, Okay, there's, to maintain consistency of the files, the registry activity, the changes to the registry will be written to temporary files, transaction log files, before they're written directly to the hives themselves. So when you're doing an incident response, depending on the time frame between the threat actor activity and when you're looking at the endpoint, you may want to apply those transaction logs directly to the registry and say, I want to operate on this data rather than perhaps older data or perhaps incomplete data. RegRipper does not automatically incorporate the transaction logs because this, I believe, my philosophy is this needs to be an intentional decision. Too many times we get caught in this, I want to do it every time, even when it may not make sense to do this. So someone may say, you have to apply the transaction logs because you missed data, Well, since we don't actually have any tracking of this going on, it's entirely possible that if you apply the transaction logs to the registry files and then run RegRipper, you're going to miss data. Data will be overwritten, data will be missing. It's possible. So rather than incorporating that directly into RegRipper itself, I want that to be an intentional decision that the analyst themselves makes. Does that make sense to anybody? Who thinks that's complete BS? No, this is a safe place. You can admit it. OK. Usage. It was originally meant to be community-based, because we all don't see the same thing, right? Who sees the same thing between every investigation they do? OK, no hands, good. Who does ransomware investigations? A couple people, 1, 2, yeah. Who sees the same thing every time? Same actions. So with a lot of the ransomware as a service stuff, because it's affiliates, we'll see the same file encryptor used, the same file extension added, the same ransom note, but we'll see different activities prior to that, won't we? So perhaps a different way of gaining access, perhaps different activities once they're on the endpoint or endpoints. That could be a whole, in fact, I think, where's Brian? Brian had a whole conference just, ResponderCon, just on ransomware response. But the point is we may not see the same thing every time. And since we don't see the same thing every time ourselves, and it's unlikely that we're all going to see the same thing together as a group, making something like RegRipper community-based means that somebody can write a plugin and submit it or make a change to a plugin that makes it better right through GitHub, and we'll all benefit from that. Does that make sense at all? I really, really hope that this is the idea we can catch on. What I don't want people to do is download RegRipper and say, look, everything that Harlan's done is awesome, it's great, I don't need to do anything, because I'll be the first one to admit, if you go into GitHub, it's been a while since those plugins are updated because the data structures haven't changed. It's what you do with the data. It's what that data leads you to, what things you pivot off of, and what things you move to into your investigation, and what new things you might find. Like I said, I have not seen 2 endpoints, even at the same customer environment, that have the same software load on them. So there's going to be different information in the registry hives themselves. Okay? So some of the things that I looked to was providing for consistency and self-documenting. What does that mean? Anybody who uses RegRipper, what does this refer to? Anybody? God, you guys really need some sugar or caffeine or something. The idea behind this is when you run RegRipper through the UI, through the GUI that I provided, there's a log file that's created. And that log file says, hey, this plugin was run, and it gives the plugin name and the version. A lot of this can be automated, or you can create individual profiles. But now you have a list on that investigation of the plugin that was run and the version that was run, and that can make a huge difference. Because some of the data structures change. So if you get some anomalous output, for example, maybe the plugin hasn't been updated. Or maybe the data structure has changed before anybody noticed. So keeping track of that information, if you have a question, you can say, well, I ran this plugin, and the version number is from 2022. OK, well, that might be an important factor. Just like if you're doing an investigation, and one guy is using in case 4.22, and somebody's using in case 7, that might make a difference. Okay. MITRE attack mapping, categories. These are all things that I've added into RegRipper. So like for instance, one of the things we can parse from the software hive is the list of scheduled tasks that are stored in the software hive. Okay? And the MITRE attack mapping is in persistence. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but that's right there in the header. And when you do a listing of the various plugins, it's included in the output. And you can actually go through and say, look, I'm only interested in those items that provide information about persistence in the software hive. And you can easily see that right there in the output. It's a CSV format. You can open it in everybody's favorite tool, Excel. So we had the categories. But something else I've added, somebody once asked, can you maintain a list, or can you put together a list of everything every plugin does? And I think we're up to 290-something plugins at this point. So what I did was I put analysis tips. So when the output is written, and you go back through the output, you get this little thing at the bottom of the plugin output that says, hey, this is what you might be looking for. These are things you might want to look for, you might want to do. This is other places you can go for information. I put URLs in there. Maybe I wrote a plugin for something that I didn't see, but something was published by, say, let's say Palo Alto, or some other team had seen it. It was pretty trivial to pull out, so I include that information so you can use it as a reference, but you can also develop an understanding of what the plugin's actually showing you. Because yeah, you can go through and you can pull information, like say from the run key, but what does all that stuff mean? What does it really mean? Did you know there's actually another key in the registry in the same Hive, whether it's the software or the end-user Hive, that will actually, for all intents and purposes, disable entries in the run key? Did you know that? So there will be an entry in the run key, and you go, ha-ha, I found it. I've got it. My investigation's done. Did that ever actually run, though? Just because it's in the run key, it doesn't mean it's going to be executed. There's ways that we can disable that. So we have plugins that pull that information out, and we have analysis tips that say, hey, this is what this output means. So if anybody has any questions about that, feel free to ask, because I'm just writing it from my perspective. Means to augment or increase granularity and there's a lot of words in that line, aren't there? But what is that? What am I trying to say here? What does this mean? Do we want to do every investigation that we have different every single time? Is that what we want to do? Or do we want to have some level of consistency, some level of process in what we do? Okay, I'm just going to start pushing the desks back towards the back of the room until we just break through the window and push everybody out. Okay, maybe some people will start to wake up then. We want to have a level of granularity and context and consistency within our investigation. So having the ability to do the same thing every time also allows us to see when we're noticing differences. Does anybody remember the BAM key in Windows 10? Anybody? Okay, it popped up in one build, and like 2 builds later, it was gone. The key was still there, but it was no longer populated. So being able to notice those differences when you're going in and looking for specific information, or you're not looking for specific information, what you're doing is you're just pulling out information to say, hey, I really don't know what I'm looking for. I've got a couple of indicators. I'm just going to search across the output of these various tools, and you're not getting information that you're looking for. Well, that can be very important. So we want to have a level of consistency so that we notice when the changes occur. Okay? And finally, the way I do analysis, the way I've always done analysis for a long time, since about 2008, and the way I currently do it now, and the way I did it several times on Friday, and I think once on Saturday, just to let you know, is create an investigative timeline from the very beginning. Okay, and so what that does is by using RegRipper, I can go in and I can not only develop pivot points, but I can also use RegRipper to go beyond the last write times in the keys, which we're normally familiar with as far as timestamps, but I can incorporate time values from within the values themselves into the timeline and get that level of granularity. There's multiple places within the registry where the timestamp that we're most interested in is embedded within the value itself. Sometimes it's a string. It's like 2022 dash or slash something, or the year and the day following, or it's embedded in a binary format. There's different structures that are used. There's the 64-bit file time format. There's the Linux date timestamp format. There's the DOS date timestamp format that is used prolifically throughout shell items. And so all of this information can be very, very valuable to us, but it's embedded within values. So we can pull that information out and incorporate it and add granularity to our timeline. So we can go beyond seeing, well, this threat actor or this insider, inside intruder or insider threat person logged in and then they logged out at a certain time. Maybe they opened Explorer or they opened up Chrome or something like that. We can go beyond that and get an additional layer of granularity and kind of see where they were going. We might look at the browser history, for example, and say, okay, they started navigating to these sites, or they went to this site and downloaded something. John talked about in his presentation a lot of stuff online, using curl, things like that. We might want to go a little bit further and try to get a little bit more granular into the actual activities that individual took while they were on that box. And we can get that information if we know where to go. But we have to have a consistent way of doing it. And for me, RegRipper has always served that purpose. Now, I mentioned RegRipper 3. It's an older version, but it has appeared in multiple distributions over time. It's in Kane, Kali, couple of others. I don't want to bore you with a complete list. You can look that up. When I was working at Nuix with Chris Pogue, I worked with a couple of developers to add extensions to both RegRipper and Yara into the workstation product. And so you would load an image or multiple images. We tested it with several server versions and Windows XP, and I think a Windows 7, multiple images loaded into a single case. The extension will walk through all the individual images, extract the registry hives, and run RegRipper, and then automatically incorporate the results back into the Nuix case. What that means is any text search or any string search or any regex search that you run across that case is also run across the output of RegRipper, and it's all automated. We did something similar with Yara to make it actually very, very useful. And then about 2 years ago, I found out that with limited functionality, RegRipper 3 was incorporated into Parabens E3. There was, at the time when I looked at it, it was, I think they pulled the app compact cache, but that was pretty much it. Do we have a question in the back? Okay, okay. Somebody just yawning and stretching? Okay. There may be other distributions out there, I don't know. Where's Brian? Brian, Cyber Triage or Autopsy? Do you guys? Autopsy. Okay. Cool. So there you go. There you have it. Autopsy uses RegRipper. Yeah, there's. I have not seen. Okay, it's kind of embarrassing, but I have actually gone out to some organizations, some commercial organizations, and see if they were interested in having any kind of this capability incorporated in their tools. In fact, I talked to Paraben. When I was asking them, I didn't know they'd already done it, so that kind of didn't go anywhere. It wasn't until June or July that I downloaded the E3 distribution available at the time and was going through the folders and going, oh, look, this is very interesting. So other than what's up there, I don't know of any other commercial tools that incorporate the capability directly into their product. What else? Here we go. OK. This is about the extent of my PowerPoint capabilities. I'm not really good with PowerPoint. But what I'm trying to say here is, with RegRipper 4, I figured out how to get Yara working. So if you say Yara and RegRipper, that ends up being Yar, which is the pirate. Boom, 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 right? That's also my humor capability. I fully extended my jokes for the day. And also, on the far side is, I've got a couple plugins. Somebody asked me if I could write the output in JSON format, hence Mr. Voorhees. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, God, you guys are really tough today. So anyway, but at least you'll remember that, This will probably come up later at dinner tonight. So a couple links up there. If you're interested in the GitHub distribution, it's up there. I haven't moved it from GitHub. It seems to be a good place to put it. I try to be a little bit better at answering some of the some of the issues that come up. Sometimes it's just, if you go through some of the issues that are there, sometimes they look like just misunderstandings. Maybe somebody running one of the plugins against the wrong hive or something like that, or maybe expecting to see something and it's like, I don't know why you're looking in the registry for that. My personal email's up there. I've had that since 1994, so it's very sentimental. And then my work email. So if you have any questions about RegRipper at all, please feel free to ask or reach out if you're more comfortable doing it that way. All right, well, that's all I've got, and thank you all for being here, and thanks to the Volatility team for putting this together. So thanks a lot.